Let's talk about some good news for once and why it matters. 2 federal judges, one in Massachusetts and one in Rhode Island, just blocked the Trump administration's attempt to suspend food aid benefits during the government shutdown. That means about 42 million Americans who rely on SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, won't lose access to groceries tomorrow. The USDA had claimed its hands were tied, that because Congress hadn't passed a spending bill, it had no authority to keep the program running. But the court saw through that. Both judges found that the USDA did have money available. Billions of dollars in contingency funds meant exactly for emergencies like this. The agency simply chose not to use them. One judge called that reasoning erroneous. Another pointed out that irreparable harm had already begun in the fear families felt about whether they'd be able to feed their kids. That line says everything. This isn't about politics. It's about what happens when families don't know if they'll be able to eat. So let's cut the bullshit. The administration wasn't powerless here. It made a choice. And the court said emphatically that power comes with responsibility. This is what checks and balances are supposed to look like. An agency tried to abandon its duty, and 2 judges said, "Not on our watch." But think about how close we came to catastrophe. If this ruling hadn't come down, 42 million people could have lost food assistance overnight. That's the scale we're talking about. 42 million human beings, including children, seniors, and veterans, facing hunger, not because the country ran out of food, but because their government decided to cause chaos and fear instead. Why? Because they can. Because cruelty is the point. SNAP isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline. It's the reason a parent can pack a lunch for their child before school. It's the reason a grandparent can afford medicine and dinner in the same week. To pretend that continuing this program is optional is heartless. And to do it during a shutdown is a weaponization of this bureaucracy. That's what this case exposed, a government trying to use technicalities to justify neglect. And the only reason it didn't succeed is because people fought back. States sued, nonprofits mobilized, lawyers argued, ordinary citizens refused to accept that nothing could be done. That's democracy at work. Not the kind you see in textbooks, but the messy, relentless kind that happens when people refuse to let power go unchecked. This decision is bigger than SNAP. It's about what kind of country we've become and who we want to be. Do we measure success by the wealth of a few or by whether families can eat? Do we allow leaders to lie and say our hands are tied while billions of dollars in emergency funds sit untouched? Do we accept cruelty disguised as fiscal responsibility? The court said no, and that matters because every time a judge upholds the law against political pressure, it's proof that at least part of our system still works. But this story also shows us how fragile our system is. We're living in a time when our rights, our programs, our protections can vanish overnight depending on who's in charge. It shouldn't take 2 emergency court rulings to make sure people don't go hungry. So, yes, we can celebrate this win, amen. But we also need to understand what it reveals, how close we are to letting indifference become policy. For me, this decision isn't some headline. It's a reminder that government isn't some distant machine. It's made up of choices, human choices that affect real lives. And sometimes the only thing standing between cruelty and compassion is a courtroom, a judge, and a few determined people who refuse to back down. That's what happened this week, and that's why it matters. Millions of Americans will eat this month, not because the system worked perfectly, but because enough people still care to make it work at all.